Hey everybody, welcome to Conversations with Jackie and Bobby. I'm one of your hosts, Jackie Angel, and today I'm joined by my friend, Lauren Scharmer. And today we're going to talk about how to support our priest friends. Actually, they don't even have to be friends. How to support our priests.
In general.
Right? Lauren is an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. And you have some other fun stuff in there too, that other certifications that freak people out. When you tell them. So I just want you to share about yourself because people don't know you. Besides the fact that you are such a good friend, you brought a couch down from St. Louis.
This is my claim to fame in the
Dallas.
In the Angel family.
That literally, I wanted a couch from IKEA. And the only there were two places in the country that had this. They were sold out everywhere else. One was St. Louis, and one was like somewhere else across
Maine,
the country.
I think, or somewhere crazy.
Yeah, and I just jokingly thinking like, hey, I'm thinking of you because there's only two places in the country that have the couch I want. And one's in St. Louis. She's like, I could get it and bring it down to you. Like,
you know when the Holy Spirit moves, you just got to do it. And I filled the back of my small SUV to the absolute brim, and
with a like pull-out queen bed, sofa
bed,
heavy IKEA couch.
It's in there. It looks great.
It does look great. It does.
The Lauren Scharmer Memorial Couch. I would like a plaque on it so people would know.
That sounds great. So besides being like the most loyal friend, who also gave me this mug, by the way, love you, mean it, and I love it. I love this mug. Besides being one of the most loyal friends, tell us about yourself and a little bit about your story.
Yeah, sure. So Jackie and I met almost a decade ago at this point, which is crazy. So a lot of years of friendship, which I'm really grateful for.
When you were in college.
Yeah. Just a young whippersnapper. Now I have gray hairs.
So do I.
I was counting them yesterday. Yeah. So my name is Lauren Scharmer. Like Jackie said, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been there for 8 or so years. I'm originally from Minnesota.
So if she says big.
We were playing Clue. Jackie and Bobby's oldest daughter, Abby, is in a Clue phase right now.
And instead of saying dagger, she said dagger.
And Abby goes, that's not what it's called.
Dagger.
So elephant in the room, I always like to add that out, that I do say some words.
Like big and dig. Yeah.
And pop. But anyway, so great. Originally from Minnesota, went to school at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., had my undergrad and my master's from there, and have been in St. Louis for 8.5 years, which is crazy. Wow. So I moved there right after college to start a youth ministry program. Did that for 6 or so years. And while I was working, went back and got my master's in social work and have been now full-time in clinical practice for about 3.5 years. So I spent some years working in home health, and then currently I'm working in hospice. And as Jackie kind of alluded to earlier, I also, over the course of the last 1.5 years or so, went back to get my certification in treating sexual addiction. So when I'm like sitting next to someone in an airplane and they're like, oh, so what do you do for work? Yeah. And when you say that you're a hospice social worker and that you have a certification in sexual addiction treatment, they're like, cool.
How's the weather? There's certain things that make people very uncomfortable. Yeah. Number one is religion. So when people say like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a Catholic speaker. And so people have either had very bad experiences and they're like, oh, moving on. Or they share their whole life story. Well, let me tell you, or people are very uncomfortable around death and dying, right? And sexual things or addictions and stuff. So you have like two out of
So it's either they talk to you for the whole flight or they're like putting their headphones in a little bit.
Like, let me tell you my problem actually I have. Can I tell you about my husband?
So I've spent had a lot of fun airplane conversations, which is great, but grateful to be able to do the work that I'm doing. And also happy to be here. And
so what I realize is you and I have a lot of, and Bobby and I, we have a lot of priest friends. We are so blessed to have, because you at Catholic University of America, obviously there were a lot of seminarians and students there that you got to befriend. Yep. And obviously Bobby was in seminary. I just have a lot of priest friends as well. And so we are just so blessed that we have priests over at our house.
A unique perspective.
Yeah, a unique perspective. That I realized, I'm like, I guess there are a lot of people around the country, around the world who it's not a regular thing just to always have priests or nuns, religious. Like you have really good religious, like sister friends. Sisters, not even sisters. I have friends who have sisters, but And so today we're going to talk about how do we help and support our priests. Yeah. Because obviously now you have quite a few perspectives, not only having friends who are priests, but now
As a
that
clinician
clinician, you have now even having your certification in sexual addiction, all this stuff. Like our friends, our priest friends, they are human beings, right? And they at some point were little boys. They were, some of us like grew up with them, and so we're like, this is just, this guy, and so we have that perspective, that they are men who have been called by God, but they're also human, and so I today we want to share about how, as lay people, we can support and encourage our priest friends, and just even you're going to give some encouragement to priests if any priests are watching, but
they are, because I'm making them watch.
You're making them all your. Hundreds of friends are like, you're going to watch this and share this with your other priest friends. So I would love for you to just share your experience.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking about this as we were kind of preparing for this and talking about it. When I went to college at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., I had a wonderful experience there. And when I got there, I all of a sudden saw all these guys walking around campus wearing a collar, going to classes. And I realized I had never met a seminarian before I was 18 and went to CUA. And I had sort of a reawakening of my faith my freshman year of college, a conversion on a retreat there, came back to the sacraments, all these things. And I slowly started noticing all these guys, and not just the cute ones in my class, but also the seminarians that
Which
were
is,
walking
by the way,
around too.
kind of confusing when seminarians wear collars.
Sure.
When you're not
you
used
think they're a priest and they're not, and then you feel awkward.
Especially when you're from like areas like California where that's not common. So when you do go to places where it is common to where you're like, hey, Father, and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't hear your confession. Actually, I mean, even I can hear a confession. I can't do anything about it, because I've heard many confessions like, I can't absolve you. I don't have any, I'm shooting blanks here. So, sorry.
But it was a very good friend of mine who I'm still good friends with to this day, Father David Gaines in Spokane, Washington, shout out. But he was a seminarian in his first year of theology. So for those of you who may not be familiar, there's kind of two paths that guys can take when they enter seminary. Either they enter right out of high school and they go to college seminary and then go to theology, or else they have to do something called pre-theology, which is a couple years of philosophy and then theology. So priests have anywhere from 7 to 10 years of seminary formation that they've done, unless you're a Jesuit, and then it's like 25, it feels like. Very much more intense.
Yeah, long time.
But so they're in seminary for a long time, and kind of like Jackie was saying, come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So my friend, now Father Gaines, was in his first year of theology and was just so good to me. I think we met in the coffee shop at the Student Center and were involved in some of the same things, and was just so kind to me. And as I was coming back, I was learning what the church taught. I was learning about what it meant to be a faithful Catholic, what it meant to be a young Catholic woman, and was really discovering this for the first time. And I didn't have really a sense. I grew up going to church on Sundays, and we would see the priest after Mass and kind of keep our distance. And I just remember, as I've reflected on it a lot since then, Jackie, thinking, I didn't know that the church loved me, because I just didn't know. But I knew that this seminarian, David, cared about me and was there for me. And it really was a compelling witness for me of the love of Christ in his church, experiencing, even at 18, the friendship of a young seminarian there, like I said, who's still a good friend. So that sort of, I started experiencing first, just for myself and relationally, what a gift it is to be in communion and communication with these guys. And then, of course, as I went through, all my years at CUA, starting to go to see friends get ordained, and then, as working in ministry, having a lot of experience with friends from, like I said, friends from college who then entered seminary well after we left college. So just have kind of seen a lot of perspectives. And then, of course, like I said, working in ministry, and just, friends as friends become friends. And it's been a huge gift for me, being able to try to be a good friend, but most importantly to have, these guys be a good friend to me, and just to be a part of life, just like we're a part of each other's lives, and have been in communion and relationship with each other all these years. That it's been, like I said, one of the greatest gifts of my life has been to come to know the heart of Christ the high priest through the heart of so many priests.
Yeah, and Lauren, I think around the summertime, I don't know anyone else who's been to as many ordinations. You're like, I'm going to this ordination. I'm like literally flying from this one to this one. Yeah. So it's pretty funny.
I think my favorite story is like I said, of my group of friends from college. We had two that they were all kind of ordained over the course of a couple summers. And we started the morning in Washington, D.C., a group of us. We drove to see our friend, now Father Andrew, get ordained a Saturday morning in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Went to the party because you can't miss the party. Obviously, we're Catholic.
Right.
And then drove from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Portland, Maine, which is like a 9-hour drive.
Oh my God.
A friend of I think there were like 8 of us that did it, including one friend that was 32 weeks pregnant. Like, we just wanted to be there to show up and to support. It's like their wedding.
Some people do pub crawls, and you guys do like ordination crawls. That's awesome. Ordination and party crawls.
Yeah, so it was 2 ordinations, 24 hours apart and like 7 states apart.
Oh,
but we did
my.
it. We lived to tell the tale. So
That's awesome.
So at these ordinations, and if you've never been to an ordination, there are a few things more beautiful. There is this beautiful thing that happens in the rite of ordination where a man literally lays prostrate
not prostate, prostrate on their stomach.
on the floor of the cathedral or the church or wherever it is. And it's the symbol of these men laying down their life. And everyone that's there at the ordination prays a litany of saints. So it's literally all of heaven and earth. They're praying for this man who is laying down their life. And I think it's a huge privilege to see that big yes at ordination, just like watching a friend get married. It's such a gift to see them make their yes to their spouse. But the real privilege of Christian friendship, and I would say this about my relationship with priests and my relationship with other people, that to not just see that one yes on their ordination day or their wedding day, but to see the million little yeses that have come before and the million little yeses that have come after.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do, is to help each other keep saying yes.
And what did one of your priest friends, like, he marked it on his calendar, his ordination day? What did he say?
So this is great. So as I've been to these ordinations, you notice that there are similar but different readings. And one of them, at least I think it is, or maybe this is just some profound inspiration of the Holy Spirit, but is from, I know what it was. These friends were getting ordained on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. So it was 2020, so it was, the whole world was going absolutely crazy. And it was like, is their ordination going to happen? Is it going to be public? Is it going to be open? Whatever. And in God, they were supposed to be ordained at the end of May, and in God's providence, they got ordained on like a random Friday night where they could each invite like 20 people on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. And it was such a beautiful thing to witness, because we know that the Sacred Heart of Jesus is a priestly heart, which means that the priestly heart that these men receive at their ordination is a Sacred Heart. And just that confirmation of one's own just kind of feeble and sometimes hard and sometimes weak heart being then transformed into a priestly heart, which is the Sacred Heart, is stunning to witness. And a dear friend of mine, Father Michael Trummer, he wrote on his ordination, or on his Google Calendar, the event for his ordination was heart surgery. Just that beautiful witness of his heart no longer being just his own, but being really, it's like a heart replacement, like taking out his heart and receiving the heart of Christ.
Which is Galatians 2:20. It says, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me."
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful image too. It's this heart surgery that he's getting a heart transplant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
and
beautiful.
nowhere is that more true, obviously, than in the heart of a priest.
And so getting to have priests to that we're friends with, and we actually experience real life with. We see the joys, the sufferings, the hardships. Even Bobby and I have experienced, priest friends who've had gone through like mental illness and depression, anxiety, who
struggles with their family, struggles with
just they're
relationships.
real people, and they have, some of them have trauma in their childhood. Some there's brokenness. They're human beings, right? Because some people treat priests like there's this like clericalism, and where they essentially like, priests are. You treat them, and of course you treat your friends with respect. Sure. You treat everyone with respect, and they're your priests. They're your priests. But we get to experience the vulnerability, the realness of priests. So I just want to ask, like, what are some things, especially because you have, especially now with your background, what are some kind of common things you see?
Yeah, and I think too, just to kind of, even before we go into that, to just say there is so much hope in these men that we know who have laid down their life for Christ and his church. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that I always come back to, is just how much hope I'm filled with, just as, to see friends say yes, obviously. But I remember, it's like a common thing you'll hear when I'll say, I'm going to an ordination. And everyone's immediate response is, no one becomes a priest anymore. Or there's this, like, these people obviously don't know anything. But
Like, we know tons of priests.
Exactly.
People priests all the time.
These seminaries are being filled, and men are still laying down their life, and to lay down your life for the church in 2022 is not an easy.
It's not something
prestigious.
Prestigious anymore. Like, it used to be. People looked up to priests like, wow, and it was something that was kind of, we were in awe of it. And now, literally, we have a friend who the day of his ordination, the night of his ordination, he got spat on.
Yeah.
Because it was right after the whole priest scandal in 2002 or whenever it was. And he was like, yeah, we were at my reception and someone spat on me. That's the reality is people, and I have friends in other countries, friends from the Netherlands who are like, oh yeah, if a priest or nun walks down the street, people will spit on you, or people will throw insults. I mean, it's not something that seems cool to do anymore, you know?
Right.
And so the men who are entering into the priesthood,
they know what they're saying yes to. And they know who they're saying yes to.
They know they're not coming into a life of like, oh, this is so, everyone like loves you and appreciates you.
Sure.
And, no.
So I think that's what I want people to hear when they hear this, is that there are really good men laying down their life for Christ and his church. And like Jackie was saying, what we have been privileged to experience and what we want to invite other people into is to experience that hope kind of firsthand and for yourself, because it's really beautiful. But yeah, so as Jackie said, I've had the great privilege of seeing a lot of friends become priests and walking with priests in those, early years of their priesthood, those really formative years. And, there's kind of common themes I think that we just struggle with as a society in general. And then I think these can kind of be like magnified when you're in like a parish environment, or when you're a public person, or all those things. And I think that one of the things I've noticed a lot is that because there is so much pressure put on these guys, that they're sort of carrying the weight of all the baggage that people have about the church, or this one priest they read about in the news, or all these horrible things that, guys take this weight on themselves, which part of that is just the reality of being a priest in today's world. But then there becomes all this pressure, and there's so much pressure to, again, this is a societal thing at large, but also I think something I see, especially magnified in priests, is that there's just this absolute steadfast belief that your worth and value as a person is in what you do and not who you are. And
right.
I think
which is a general thing, because people don't ask you they're like, what do you do for what you do, and then kind of your status and what you do is like, oh, well, I think less of you or more of you based on your income, what you do.
Sure, or how much you perform, or how much they see you doing, or how often they see you doing it, that there's just this real, like I said, this lie that I think is from the evil one, that your value as a priest is dependent on what you do. And what did we just say? That, priests are not good for what they're doing, although we need the sacraments and we need priests to do these things that only priests can do. But also that as a church, we have to support these priests in knowing that, that their worth is not in what they do, and is in who they are, and like just the goodness of themselves. And so I just think that's one common lie, that these guys who are called from all their complexities and all the things of their past and all their struggles in relationship, or their struggles in prayer, all those things, that there's just this, and ultimately what we know that is true of our identity as beloved sons and daughters is that we have a God who says that your worth is not in what you do, but who you are, that you are. God could have created anyone or anything, and yet still created us out of love here. And, to really try to kind of own that identity and receive that identity when you have a world and a church, or, God forbid, parishioners like reminding you that your worth is in what you do, I think is really something I've seen a lot, and is really difficult to.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure. There's burnout, and actually there was a study done that it's like there have been many priests who've experienced burnout before the age of, 45?
Yeah. In kind of preparing for this, I was just, tossing questions out to friends, and I had one friend who told me that he learned in his first year of priesthood implicitly that taking a vacation was bad, because he was in a parish with a pastor who believed that his worth was a nice guy, but total workaholic, right? Which I think has been a reaction of either bad priests or just kind of a reaction to the culture. Like, we have to do more. And so these priests go to parishes, and they have, too much responsibility or too much on their plate, and they each have 9 jobs. There's all this craziness. But he just said that he never saw his priest take a vacation, his pastor. And so I think someone called him out in his first year of priesthood to say, you have to take a rest.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to be But that I think that's a common thing, unfortunately, is that, and especially when a priest is not known, then the way that they can prove themselves to other people is by, proving their worth, not just for who they are, but in doing these things, this kind of performance mindset. Again, this is very pervasive across the culture. I mean, I think we all struggle with this in different, how much am I producing or how much am I doing? But yeah, just that is like one thing that is, when he said that, I mean, it was just such a gut punch, because ideally, people who work, and obviously it's different when you have kids, but Monday through Friday, then have a weekend off. Then priests obviously work on Saturdays and Sundays, so they should have one day off during the week.
Yeah.
But then people ask them to do things on their day off, or there's not a culture where that's supported for just real rest, even though God commands us to do it.
To take a Sabbath, yeah.
Right. And then they're kind of stuck in that mindset of, am I weak for needing to rest?
And then if you have, most priests on their first assignment are assigned, they aren't made pastor right away. They're under a pastor, so they become like an associate pastor. And was it one of your priest friends who was like, normally it's either, if it's not a narcissist, it's a workaholic? I mean, and Bobby and I have had a couple friends who we have just heard the horror stories of, like, the pastor is a narcissist and how horrible. Oh my gosh. Like, I have friends who make fun of me because I'm like, narcissist. Everyone's a narcissist. Like, but when you are literally working for somebody, and I have worked for people who are high on the scale, they would score pretty high on that scale. It is horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the twisting of, like, you're always like, I'm always right, you're always wrong, and I'm gonna twist your word, and you're like, wait, what?
Sure. And I think too that there is this, like any first job that you have, that boss is gonna be, you're gonna want to please, or you're gonna want to do well for, and there's already this pressure when you're doing something for the first time.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to be adding to that pressure by putting
Right.
these guys in unhealthy assignments.
So praise God when they do have an awesome pastor.
Yes.
It's like when you have a bad manager, you work for a bad manager, and then you have like a really healthy work environment.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh
I
my
know,
gosh,
it's like night and day.
Night and day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, wow, you kind of don't. Sometimes you don't even know how
Realize how
toxic a
affected
workplace
you are.
is until you work at a healthy, and you're like, oh, this was what it was supposed to look like.
Which is why it's so important for us to be forming healthy priests who in 10, 15, 20 years will be then healthy pastors, to kind of break the cycle of that has that we've seen like pretty pervasive even in the church.
And another thing that would lead to someone being a healthy priest is, and this is probably what you've seen, is like making sure that they have community.
Yeah.
Because how lonely. I had a priest friend once say to me, we almost doom priests to fail when we send them to live by themselves.
Yeah.
I was like, yes. Like, when you don't have accountability, when you don't have brotherhood. Well, and then, and Bobby would say this too, like, when you go from these guy friends who like experience community in seminary, and they have this great, and then all of a sudden you're like in this remote parish where you have no community and you don't live with anybody. Oh, what a crazy thing. So
Right.
yeah, you've had priest friends who said like, yeah, you can get lonely. You need people.
Right. And I think that we all need each other. Like I've seen this still, as a 30-year-old who's single, that I need other people, and I need.
If you have any brothers who are single, by the way, this beautiful, lovely woman next to me, I'm just saying this is a shout out right here.
Well, I have to slip her a 50. Let me.
I will be the Catholic matchmaker. I'm just saying that's a job I would love to have. So anybody, brothers,
But not if they're weird.
Yeah, well, of course. I would hope that's because that's like normal Catholic, solid Catholic men who think Lauren is
And
awesome.
who like to play Clue.
Who likes to play Clue? Yeah. Skippo.
Skippo.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So
Now that we got that out of the way, I can leave now.
so even as a single
Yes,
woman,
the need for community.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I
Right.
think this is true. And I think many of my married friends or friends in relationships would say the same thing. It's all too hard to do on our own.
Right.
And I think, when I had my kind of coming to know the faith in a deeper way in college, I was surrounded by people, and thank God, because I wasn't afraid, and I was filled with so much hope because I had other people who were genuinely trying to follow Jesus just as I was. And I think we all need that, and priests do that with each other, and they need that with other people.
Yeah.
And that the reality is that if we're not going to look for communion in each other and in genuine first in the Lord, of course, but if we're not going to look for it in each other, then we're going to look for it elsewhere. And that
and some unhealthy places.
Absolutely. And so that's why it's so important for us to have each other, and so we don't start looking for it in all the wrong places.
Because we need community. We need to feel loved, affirmed, safe, secure, to have friendships. We were not meant to be alone. We were made for a community.
And I just think the reality is that the deepest desire of the human heart is to be seen, known, and loved.
Right.
And when we can genuinely not only see, know, and love others, but then be seen, known, and loved by others, it is such a compelling witness of the generosity of God. And I think the beautiful part about the heart of a priest is that a dear friend of mine said before his priestly ordination, he said, the priesthood is proof that God's people are worth giving up everything for, which I think there's nothing true that can be said about the priesthood and the heart of the priest. And they spend their lives trying to see, know, and love other people and their parishioners and the people in front of them. They still need to be seen, known, and loved.
Right.
By
and
each
you
other
were reading a
and
book
other people.
by a priest, right? Who was saying a lot of priests weren't affirmed as affirmation thing.
Sure. So there's this great psychologist named Conrad Bars, not actually a priest, but did a lot of work with priests. This was 50 years ago.
Okay.
And the book's called I Will Give Them a New Heart. It's pretty dense. It's not really light reading. But it's been pretty eye-opening. But even just saying there's this culture of I don't even know what you would call that, where these guys, either when they were raised in their homes, were not affirmed by their parent. And maybe we'll do a whole other podcast on attachment theory and how wild that is. But if they didn't receive love and affirmation and care in their home, in their family of origin, with their primary caregiver, and then they go to other places and, they're not receiving affirmation. And, seminary is a lot of things, and there are a lot of good parts about seminary, but you're not going around like affirming people. Whereas affirmation is probably not the primary love language of most seminaries. And so then there's this kind of, we're seen for what we do, like we said. And so, but then there's this kind of implicit belief that, when we're not affirmed just for who we are, that then, again, we start looking for that affirmation and that comfort in other places. And this is
and that can happen
everywhere.
in marriage.
Absolutely.
I mean, Bobby and I have listened to podcasts, and Bobby's read book about why affairs happen and kind of the slow, and a lot of times that happens with the breakdown of the couple when the communication isn't there, but then it's there's an emotional distance, and there stops being that love, that affirmation, and you start looking for it in the coworker, because now a coworker is affirming you. And guess what? Newsflash, this can happen with priests too. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's
and I think and we were just talking about this earlier, that, celibacy, which is a promise that a priest makes, or a deacon makes actually at their ordination, it's for both the king, Jesus, and the kingdom, which is the people. So they're making this promise to God, but then they're also making this promise to us, that there's a beautiful line, I don't know if it's in the actual rite of ordination, but where it says, do you promise celibacy for the sake of the kingdom? And so these men, there are a lot of conversations, all our problems would just be solved if priests could be married. And I'm like,
no.
This, not only is there the practical reality of just, at 3 a.m. you can wake up in the middle of the night and go anoint someone, which as a hospice social worker, I've had to have, call priests to do that. But then just also it shows the spiritual reality of, like I said, that God's people are worth giving up everything for, and that we believe that what we have in Jesus is so great and so much better than anything that the world can give us, that we will forsake. I mean, what's the greatest good that the earth would say? Money and sex. That's what the world says are the two things you need
to be happy.
To be happy and to be powerful. And that what we are, promised in Jesus is that he is enough. And that's why we need
Jesus, who is celibate, and poor.
Yeah, that we need these heroic priests that are willing. Like I said, that it's so beautiful, them laying down their lives, because it shows us that there's something more out there and that there's something otherworldly. But, that's not always consoling, as, in kind of the day-to-day and just the low moments and the struggles. Just like in marriage, you're not, when you're feeling lonely or when you're struggling or when you're frustrated, you're not like, oh, but my vows are so beautiful and we made this promise. Yeah, you draw on the strength of that, but that's not always consoling in the actual moment, which is why healthy coping mechanisms are important, which is why good relationships are important, which is why just the reality of being known is so crucial for healthy humanity, and especially for healthy priests.
Well, and human beings have love languagues, right? So even every person is different in how we love, how we receive love. And so to even know that.
My friend, Father Paul Clark, Father Skippo Paul, he says, your love language is language.
Is language. But you are a gift giver. how you give love is you're an affirmer and you're a really good gift giver, because I'm not the best gift giver. And so when I have friends who are really good gift givers, because I have a couple, and I'm like, oh,
like when they drive a couch,
they're really amazing gift givers, and I'm more I'm better at affirmation or whatever, but I'm just not. So it's like even learning that about our priest friends, so like their love languages.
How can I best see, know, and love them?
Right. All right. Is there anything else that you see as like a common theme before we can kind of like go into how we as lay people can support and love our priests?
Yeah, I think we can't talk about like the current state of the priesthood without just kind of addressing the elephant in the room, which is there is a lot of fear surrounding genuine relationships with other people because of so many bad priests who have betrayed the trust of the people and of the church.
And even if it's like 1% of the priest population that is like have done horrific things, it's like that brings about fear in the entire of like having relationships or even like wanting to be in relationship
and like
with people.
What does 1 John tell us? That perfect love casts out fear.
Yep.
And so I think that's so important for us to kind of, the best way that we can counteract the fear that we can see just in like the society and in the culture in general is in that fear. And that someone said to me once, no one dislikes a bad priest more than a good priest. And I just think that that's true, that, they share the anger and the frustration, and they are bearing the weight of it more than anyone in having still said yes to this life. And I think and just a word, if anyone is listening who has been hurt by a priest, I'm really sorry. And I think no one would say that they are sorrier than a good priest. Yes. And that is really frustrating. That's a unique type of pain, because this person who has been given so much has been entrusted to, and who is revealing the heart of Christ to other people. I know in times in my life where I've been really hurt by a priest, I can think of one situation in particular. Like, it still stings even years and years and years later, because this is someone who should have loved you or cared for you or protected you. So just to kind of say that, and to take courage that there are men who are good and who are full of love and full of hope and generosity. And I think that's something that has been really like life-giving for me to remember. And
just as and one more thing, it's obviously that you've seen and that I've seen, it just obviously our culture, like these men go into seminary and they're not fully healed, fully integrated people. So this is just in our like, Bobby and I talk about this, but the average age of exposure to pornography is between 9 and 11.
Yeah,
when people hear that, they're like,
closer to 7 now.
Yeah. And people are shocked by that statistic, and they're like, like people shove it in your, like kids who have smartphones will shove it in other kids' face.
That's one thing I talk about on airplanes a lot, is asking parents what filters they have on their home internet and on their phone and how.
Yep. And so obviously our priest friends are not like, they haven't avoided this as young men, as like little kids. And so that's another thing too, is supporting, giving them, and then even with COVID and the mental health, all the anxiety, the depression, the mental health, the human formation of priests. And so I'm really glad that there are seminaries who, when they focus on the human formation, because some seminaries really focus on the intellectual formation, and they're like, you need to do all these things right. But I know seminaries are like, I would rather you have good human formation. You root pornography out of your life. You learn how to have healthy relationships. We care more about that than the perfect liturgy, like everything has, we care more about the human formation. So
this summer I was having a conversation. A priest friend, Father Dan McCon, was visiting all the way from Australia. It does sound very similar. But he's been a priest for 9 years, I think. Yes, 9 years. And there's going to be a quiz at the end of this, right? How long am I actually getting these things right? And I had a friend over who is a priest in St. Louis and has only been a couple of years ordained. And I said to Father Dan, do you have any advice for this friend? And he said, just remember, God ordains men, not angels. And just this, and I think this goes back to this conversation about pressure, that there's this feeling like I can't struggle in anything because I have... either that should have been done and there's shame, because shame is the worst.
The worst.
That there's this feeling like I can't struggle with anything, relationally, humanly, psychologically, because I've been ordained. And there's this like feeling, and then we put up masks and and by we I mean priests, but also we as in anyone. And then we put up walls, and then once those walls get built, it gets really hard to knock them down.
Yeah, yeah. So for anyone watching or listening, it's like, how can we as lay people support? Hi, Mom. Yeah, how can we support and love our priest friends? Well, it was funny because you texted a bunch of priests and said, what would you say? Right, like, what would you want people to know?
What is one thing you wish lay people knew about supporting priests? I think is what I said.
And you got some great responses.
Yeah, and God love him. I mean, I sent probably 20 text messages out, and a bunch of them responded. And so just to kind of share with you guys some of the things that they said. And there was a common theme in all of it.
Yep.
Was don't be weird. Don't treat us like, which is just like good advice for
weird.
Anyone.
Treat us like normal humans.
Right.
Again, we're not angels.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm an angel, not metaphysically, but luckily by marriage. So yeah.
But this one friend said, there is a tendency in people to treat us like we are made of fine china. And I get that that's a respect thing, but also it's an impediment to relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that there is this, just like any relationship progresses, like it's not a matter of, okay, we never talk to the priest and we just kind of say hi to him after mass, or we have to be best friends with him. Like there is a whole spectrum of relationship and communion in there that I think is like worth looking into.
Like we had a priest friend, one of your priest friends over for dinner last night.
Yes.
And he has not yet been invited to dinner at his parish. That makes me so sad because I belong to a parish where like everybody asks the priest for dinner. Like that's just the parish I'm at. But the fact that this priest has not been asked to dinner makes me so sad. Like what? Yeah. People ask priests for dinner.
Yeah.
And be normal. Like one of your priest friends, right, like said something about like, we want to see normal family life.
Family life. Absolutely that. And especially for these men who have given up a family that, there are a few things more beautiful than being invited into like the actual family life. And
like messy toddlers.
This is what I would do. If I was a person who had never had a priest over for dinner, which I'm not, but I would go up to the priest after mass and I would say, Father, good to see you. Welcome to the parish, whatever. And then say, we would love to have you over for dinner. What's the best way for us to get in touch with you? Realizing that they have dozens of people saying hi to them after mass and they're not going to like remember
every single person
and every minute of that conversation.
And asking for their numbers, not like asking for how they prefer to be contacted.
Yes, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Most websites have the priest's email on it, which is always going to be the easiest thing because then they can refer back to it. And invite them over to bless your house. That could be a really
that would be
easy,
probably the easiest
thing.
one.
Not awkward. There's an activity that everyone can participate in. They can go around and sprinkle holy water in all the rooms. I think that's like a really simple thing. But then when you invite them over, actually, invite them over into your life and not just into this perfect image that you want to portray to other people. And I think, that this is true of everyone, that when we are ourselves, we give other people permission to be themselves.
Right.
But that means that us as lay people, if we're inviting priests into our life and we're putting on a show and we're scrubbing the baseboards and we're
pretending everything's perfect,
we're presenting this whitewashed version of our lives, then what's going to happen when they come into our house? They're going to think that they have to do the exact same thing.
Yes.
And so to realize like what, and again, when you're meeting someone over for the first time, like I get you want it to be nice and all those things. But I was telling Jackie, I would say, go up to them, invite them over, clean the toilet, and ask if they have any allergies. Like that would be like the things that
And I even clean the toilet with 4 kids. Sometimes it's a little too far. I'm like, sorry, dude. Sorry, there's like poop on the toilet. Johnny just had a big old, no, just kidding. I mean, maybe. I'm just saying. I try to, clean all the, but that doesn't always happen.
Right.
And I will say the best thing I've ever.
But you do want to find out if they have any allergies. Because like, what if they're allergic and then
important. Or there's something like you really don't like. I would say the best compliment I've ever received from a priest friend, and I know they've said this to you too, is we feel like we can be ourselves in your house. We don't have to put on a face, put on a show. It's because Bobby and I are vulnerable. We're real. We don't like pretend to be, they see, when we do have priest friends over, we definitely, they are definitely like, I feel called to celibacy after they see us with our crazy toddler. Yes, you have affirmed my call to celibacy, because they know they can go home, after they've experienced the chaos of family life. It's really a gift for them. Right. It's beautiful because they're like, I can go home And sit in
yeah,
silence.
I think I loved this that a friend said, treat priests like humans. Yes, we mediate Christ, but before we received holy orders, we received baptism. The most supportive lay people in my life support me as a human being.
Oh, awesome.
And that, because that's exactly like we were saying earlier, that's
Yeah.
supporting and loving and knowing and seeing people for who they are and for not what they do. Again, what priests do is incredibly important, and only they can do it. And, you know, thank God that they are willing, you know, to do it and to lay down their lives for that. But I think that, you know, and one priest said that being invited into family life kind of breaks some of the loneliness that we can feel. Because
priests can get lonely, guys. The priests who are never invited to parishioners' home, like that makes me so sad.
Or if they don't have community, or if they're with a workaholic pastor, or any of these things, that it can be really, and just the, you know, inviting them into a place where they don't feel like they have to perform, I think is a really important and beautiful thing. And invite them to play a game with your kids, and invite them to normal things, to come to a soccer game on a Saturday morning if they're able to, all these things to just kind of, again, not feel like we have to portray some perfect image, because again, then that's going to be how they're, how they feel like they have to act when they're around us. And I think one friend said it really well, that, again, as Jackie was saying, that each man is ordained in their complexities and in their struggles, but also just in their own personalities and their own quirks and their likes and their dislikes. And, you know, especially for a parish that, you know, say one priest leaves and a new one comes, free to go up and say, oh, well, Father, last priest always did this. Or they always like that constant comparison
is horrible.
And that's, you know, none of us like being compared to other people. And none of us like that feeling like we have to measure up to some false standard. And, you know, there is room for so many types of good priests, again, in all their complexities and all their
different
quirks.
personalities, temperaments, love languages, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I think just that, you know, oh, well, Father so-and-so used to always do this. And it's like,
don't do that.
No.
Don't do that. Be normal, people. Be normal.
Don't be weird.
Don't be weird.
I think that's really important. But I just, like I said, invite them to be a part of your life. If they baptize your baby, invite them over for the reception, to the baptism party. Something easy. It doesn't have to be anything formal or crazy or. And you know, some of my favorite conversations, and you know, I'm really looking in St. Louis. I'm very grateful that we have a lot of really good priests and good men laying down their lives. And you know, our community that we've built there, you know, when someone has a party, there's always a priest, 1 or 6 that are there at the party, and that there's, you know, whether it's me or someone else that's hosting, we're just kind of used to inviting priests into the fabric of our lives, and no one's ever like, oh, why is Father so-and-so here?
Well, because you also aren't throwing like keggers. Like that's the thing. Y'all are like good Catholic adults who are throwing parties that were like, people are not getting dry. You're all not getting sloshed. Like have, you know, it's like socials. You're having great time, having food, having, it's great.
So, and I'm just thankful for the life, like I said, and you know, some of my favorite moments are when, you know, you see like a priest having an intense, beautiful conversation with someone on the couch that maybe they just met her. And what a witness that is to other people. You know, I've had like non-Catholic friends come to parties before. I'm like, just, you know, there'll probably be a couple priests there. don't be shocked.
Yeah.
This is when you see that. But I think that's, you know, I'm very grateful that that's just a part of, you know, kind of like Jackie and I've been saying, just the fabric of our lives, but especially what we've created in, you know, in St. Louis and the community that we've tried to cultivate is one of genuine communion with each other, and one that, please God, we are known for who we are and not what we do.
And I also want my kids to know that that priests are normal. That priests are just and same with any friends who are nuns who are consecrated. It's like, this is a possible, because when kids see that, that's just like, oh, that's a normal person just like me. Like, then they are more likely to be like, maybe I could be called to be a priest, or maybe I could be called to be a nun. Like growing up, I never saw a nun. Like, I really didn't know any nuns personally in real life till much later, maybe college. And so I never thought like, oh, I could be a nun, because I had this idea like, oh, they all have to be quiet and wear really weird shoes and whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not quiet, and I kind of like fashion, you know, whatever. Sure. And so until I met some nuns, I was like, oh my gosh, you really make me want to be a nun. Like I could, you know, knowing that like they could have my personality, or that could be a call. And so same with priests, like I want my kids to see the different vocations, and but that includes us lived out beautifully and well. And that's why even Bobby and I have a heart for our single friends, and because I know when I was single, it was beautiful for like families to invite me into their home so I could see the reality of family life.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was the common theme when you texted your priest friends. It was all like,
I'd say I probably got 15 responses saying a variation of the same thing. invite us over for dinner, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's
like, we just want it, like, real. Be real. Be normal.
Exactly. To be
Don't treat us like we're angels,
China.
princes,
Exactly.
fine china. Like,
Right.
we're just normal people.
Absolutely. That there's a respect and a love for the priesthood that you and I both have, and that we want to see in the church. But again, that doesn't mean that we have to treat them like something that they're not. And I think to the kind of on the, I don't know if it's the other end of the spectrum, but then there's this sense in certain experiences of parish life, well, like the priest has to do everything. And if they're not there, then what are they doing? Or if they're not, have their kind of hand in every pot, then like that's not a healthy parish, which I just think part of good priests is emboldening lay people to make decisions and to run things well. And I just think that that's a piece of it too, that, there are things that only priests can do, mainly the sacraments, and that, we want them to be available and generous to do that. But that doesn't mean that Father has to come to every single meeting of the,
or do everything. Like, in fact, it should be the lay people who are doing a lot
absolutely.
of, like, all the parishes that Bobby and I have seen around the country that are thriving, it's because, like, well-oiled machines, because the parishioners, there are small groups, there are, like, it's amazing to see, like, the parishioners are empowered to do Bible studies, do all this stuff. It's awesome. Yeah. What would you say to encourage, if all your priest friends who are making watch this? Right. Or like, what would you, or listening to this on a podcast form, what would you say to those to encourage them?
I think the first thing I would say is just on behalf of Grateful Church, thank you. Like that's, I think words could never say enough, my gratitude, our gratitude for the gift of the priesthood and the heart of the priest. And, at every moment in my life where I can look of real suffering, real joy, and everything in between, that there has been, kind of a priest there cheering me on and supporting me, again with a host of other people. So that is kind of the most my thing that I'm really grateful for. And as I don't think I mentioned this earlier, that I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to start doing some formation stuff with men in formation in seminary, in different dioceses and religious orders, that kind of thing. And it has been one of the greatest joys of my life to be able to do that and to come and speak to these men, specifically about the convergence of mental health and the spiritual life, as they're on that journey and as they're, discerning the priesthood. And I think that and this is true for all of us, that there is nothing that disqualifies us from living into the abundance and the life that God has called us to. There's nothing that disqualifies us, but there is stuff that could destroy us.
Ooh.
And if we don't work...
That's a good catchphrase right there. Put that on bumper sticker. There's nothing that disqualifies us, though there are definitely things that can destroy us.
And that,
Hashtag Lauren Scharmer. Yeah. Did you make that up or did you read that from somewhere?
I made it up.
You made it up? Okay. All right. I am quoting you, putting on a bumper sticker, putting it on my mug right here. Okay.
That'll be the next mug I bring. But you as priests, as men in formation, again, as just beloved sons and daughters of a good and kind God, that we need to be willing to figure our stuff out and to, be relentless about being seen and known and loved and keeping things in the light. And I think there is this, in, kind of the Catholic Christian world, there is this feeling of like, there are things we struggle with on a natural level and then things we struggle with on a supernatural level. Mm-hmm. And that we try to fix the natural with the supernatural and the supernatural with the natural. Like kind of there's this weird, like if you're struggling with an addiction or anxiety or depression, we're like, oh, I'll just pray harder. Like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah, of course, prayer is important and our relationship with God is important. But to address things as they're happening to you or as you're noticing, or maybe things that were an issue or not an issue in seminary, and then they come up, in those early years of priesthood, or you get triggered by, you're reminded of a traumatic event from your childhood and react in a relationship you have with a parishioner. It could be any number of these things that we have to be willing to constantly see ourselves, to constantly keep those things in the light. And I think that there is, the question of, especially for any priests that are listening, like, how do I know when I need to get help? It's kind of the, obviously there's, please God, have, the accountability with the Lord and with your brother priests and with your friends and, appropriate vulnerability. That doesn't mean from the pulpit you should be sharing every
so I am addicted to
there's every difficult thing that you're going through, or there's a place for real vulnerability. We've all been at the dinner table when someone shares just a little too much, and it's kind of like, what do we all do now?
You're like, did you know that my husband last night? You're like, stop, please. Can you please
don't want to hear that. But I think that, and I would say this is for anyone who's listening, that when there's something that either comes up or something that you're reminded of, or an addiction that is, an issue again, or all these things, like once we start noticing that it's really impacting our ability to like live our daily lives, that when we're constantly thinking about it or constantly trying to placate it or whatever it is, that's where you really need to know, okay, this is something that I have to be, willing to go and address. And
so it's never wrong to get therapy anytime.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But especially when it's impacting your daily life, your daily functioning,
Mm-hmm.
you need, please seek help.
Mm-hmm.
Please seek like a therapy.
healing.
Yeah. And even with therapy, it's like, you want to find someone who, it's a relationship. So you also want to find someone you gel with, that you feel safe with. And because that's probably going to be the most fruitful relationship.
And to have, that there are, that there is, like we were saying, that shame is the worst. And I think when priests are so quick to give mercy in the confessional and so generous in doling out the Lord's mercy to people, but then maybe are not as merciful with themselves. Yeah. Or then, not only are they bearing the weight of the sins of the world in the confessional, hearing these things, but then also, the weight of their own sin. And I think most priests would say this, that they're a lot more merciful with, and I think we say this in general, like we're so quick to be merciful with other people, but not as quick to be merciful with ourselves, and not seeing ourselves as the Lord sees us there. And so, when you notice yourself, when any of us notice ourselves kind of in that cycle of shame, to just to call it out, like this is, I have a lot of friends who will text me, or I'll text them, this is the lie I'm believing, or this is where I see this thought going. Can you remind me of what's true? Yeah. And I think that's, as image bearers of Christ, that we have to be willing to do that with and for each other. Yeah. And especially that's true for priests, that I hope you have people who are willing to do that with and for you.
That you're vulnerable enough with people so they can call you out, they can help you.
And like I said, that the gift of that priests so freely give and seeing, knowing, and loving others, that then it's also something that the Lord desires for you, and that, in especially moments of frustration in ministry or just pastoral life, or, so-and-so on the parish council who just is really getting on your nerves, or any of the like weird complexities that come with running a parish and being involved in ministry, to just realize that there are people who really do love you and desire to be in relationship with you. And again, that doesn't mean every parishioner you have has to be your best friend, but for the love of God, I hope they invite you over for dinner. I mean, that's if you hear nothing else.
Or just to bless your house.
Exactly. Yeah. To just allow us to be in relationship with each other, and to remind these men like who and what you laid down your life for.
Right.
I think is
the bride of Christ.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share that you came up in your heart?
No, I think, like I said, if anything else for people to hear, there is so much hope for these men laying down their life for the church. And we, like I said, as a church, are just really grateful. Yeah, we are so grateful. So you guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us. And it was just great to have you here. So glad. You didn't have to bring a couch this time, so thank you. Even if I didn't eat tacos at lunch. How do we go to taco place and you order a salad, friend? I just don't. My trust is just, I'm just kidding. Anyways, you guys, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.